Hi, I'm Simon K. Jones, and this is the audio version of my newsletter. This is called Getting It Completely Wrong. And it's basically an example of why you shouldn't always listen to what I'm rambling on about. While rummaging through my back catalogue last week, I stumbled upon an old post called Planning Your Story's Big Finale. Allow me to indulge myself by quoting my own writing. Here we go, and quote, 18 months in, I can see the end. It's just peeking over the horizon. Still a fair ways off, but approaching with alarming rapidity, which means I'm entering into a new phase, wrapping it all up. That process is what I'm talking about today. End quote. Such confidence. Marvel at the clarity of vision. I'm an arrow loosed from the bow. That post was published in May 2023. As some of you will already know, I didn't finish publishing Tales from the Triverse until January 2026. We're not talking about being a few months out here, that's almost 3 years later. This is, of course, very silly and slightly embarrassing, and does call into question whether you should listen to anything I say. You can read the old post in full if you're really so inclined and fancy a laugh. I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes. So why am I highlighting my extreme inability to estimate time? For starters, it highlights the fuzzy nature of serial fiction, especially if you're writing and publishing as you go. Without a locked manuscript, the story is very much still in flux and susceptible to changes that cannot be predicted. I could have wrapped up Triverse in my originally estimated time, probably around late 2023. I can't see from here whether that would have made for a better or worse story, but it certainly would have been different. Characters never met, story paths never trod, themes never explored. Most of my favourite ideas in the back third of Triverse came about quite late in the day, and weren't part of the original outline. None of them would have made it onto the page if I'd forced myself to end it earlier. Triverse was possibly a unique case in that it leaned into an anthology structure and was far more episodic than anything I'd written previously. Theoretically, I could have continued writing largely standalone detective stories in that universe for as long as I wanted. Pulling the trigger to launch into the finale was a specific decision, one that I didn't actually get to until early 2025. I am capable of being more disciplined. My previous serial, No Adults Allowed, was conceived as a tight 30 chapters, and so determined was I to stick to that structure that I numbered the chapters in reverse order, counting down to 0. That added sense of mystery of what would happen at 0 required me to hit the chapter points precisely. It was a satisfying creative challenge. This brings me back to something discussed with S.E. Reed during part 3 of our Crafting Serial Fiction mini-series. It's an obvious point to make, but if your weekly serial consists of 30 chapters, that means it will take you 30 weeks to complete its run, and that's about 7 months. The size and shape of your story translates into time in a much more direct way than if you're working on a manuscript that nobody's going to see until it's done. Practically, this means you can scale the project appropriately to your own level of confidence. If it's the first time you've serialized a story, perhaps think twice about committing to a tale that will be running for multiple years. S.E. Reed has published multiple complete serials in the time I published Tales from the Triverse, because she keeps to around 20 chapters per story. I am envious. My brain instead trends towards longer, larger stories. As a reader and viewer, I've always enjoyed a dose of the epic, and draw inspiration from television structures as much as from novels. If my advice here is to plan carefully, and only commit to something if you know you can handle it, what then if you entirely miscalculate? Case in point being with me and Triverse. That's when the writing turns into a marathon and a test of stamina. There were points during Triverse's run when I wasn't entirely certain I was going to make it. My brain was overloaded, sagging under the sheer weight of all the characters and plot threads and thematic links, locations and names and backstory and lore buzzing around my mind, like that scene in The Matrix when Neo first sees in code, except it's all gibberish. Keeping track of everything was challenge enough, and that was before having to then write actual prose that wasn't terrible. Thinking back, here are some things that got me through. Something I introduced right at the beginning of Triverse were bonus chapters. These were outside of the main story, and a way to have a bit of fun by dropping in extra background details. For example, a newspaper front page or a press release or an academic paper. When I hit the long middle of the book, having the option of switching to a bonus chapter helped to keep the writing fresh. It would also give me extra time to work out where the main story was going, which proved invaluable. And while a bonus chapter isn't exactly free, it tends to come together quicker than writing 1,500 or more words. Choosing the narrative shape of your story is a big decision, obviously, before you even start writing or publishing. How are you going to tell it structurally? What is the point of view? I find first person easier to write generally, but only for shorter stories. Maintaining a first person fixed perspective narrator for a longer story is challenging, in large part because it limits your options. With Triverse, I knew it would be an ensemble piece with a larger cast, and a roving perspective that would switch character mid-chapter as and when the story demanded. This proved to be hugely helpful during the long, drawn-out middle of the serial's run, as it meant I could always refresh my brain in the story by switching POV. Moving the spotlight around would immediately bring new ideas, even within the same scene. I exist somewhere on the middle of the plan-no plan spectrum. There are key plot events that I know are coming, but how I get to them is fuzzy. A destination then, but multiple routes. Knowing what's coming up, even loosely, can really help. Struggling to write the current chapter? Well, remember that big death that's coming up, or the major plot twist. You know it's coming, but the readers don't. What glee, that mischievous fun there is up ahead. Use that anticipation to get through the tricky bits, because it's going to get fun soon enough. So this next one won't work for everyone and doesn't always work for me, but sometimes picking the right tune can make all the difference. Let's say I'm struggling to settle into writing a particularly grim chapter in which my detectives are investigating a gruesome murder scene. Perhaps I've spent all day in the sunshine, or have just got back from playing squash and murder is far from my mind, unlike normally. Well, sometimes all you got to do is put Howard Shore's score for the film Seven on, and the old brain clicks right into gear. I tend to have a vague playlist of albums to suit different tones. The tension music, the action music, the comedy music, the romance music, and so on. Different albums cycle through, but there's always something to draw upon if I need some oral stimulation. Here's a personal grumble that I often wheel out, and some of you will have heard before. The mantra of "you must write every day" doesn't work for me. To be clear, I have no problem with others doing it, and if it works for you, then that's all good. I struggle to write every day because waves hands generally at life, but as I've built a solid writing habit over a decade of serializing my work, I've come to realize that I do my best work when I don't write every day. Gaps in between writing sessions are now a deliberate part of my process. After I publish a new chapter on a Friday, I don't even think about the serial again for 24 hours. Then on Sunday, new ideas are percolating through my brain whether I like it or not. But even then, I don't tend to start putting pen to paper. Those spaces tend to be where I have my best ideas. If I were to fill them up with active writing, I doubt it would improve the final result. This will be different for everyone, of course, but if you're finding yourself increasingly stressed at trying to get back to the page on a daily basis, just cut yourself some slack. So you probably have some readers. Perhaps there's just one, perhaps there's more. Recognize them, admit to yourself that they're there, that other humans on the planet, for some weird reason, have decided to read your stuff. Harness it into motivation to keep going. They might be quiet, perhaps they don't actively comment, but they're there, and they're waiting for the next chapter, so get to it. At least that's what I tell myself when I was rebelling against my own story. And this final one probably doesn't need to be here if you're reading my newsletter and have got this far in this post, but anyway, try serial publishing. Given the way my brain works, or, doesn't, if I'd been writing my manuscripts quietly by myself, locked away on my hard drive or in a drawer, with nobody in the world any the wiser, I'm certain I would never have finished a single project. That's my weakness. If you can get through a manuscript consistently each time from the comfort of your own brain, then huge respect. Obviously, lots of people can, because that's why there are a fair few books in the world. But this newsletter was set up largely for everyone else. I stumbled into serializing my stories, not realizing it would turn out to be a massive productivity hack for my brain. After 30 years of faffing about without making much progress as a writer. Since committing to serials, I've been writing consistently for over 10 years. Ultimately, it's writing and publishing in serial form that keeps me coming back. Anyway, I hope those tips help if you find yourself in a project that's kind of got out of hand and is stretching away into the far distance from you. You can find out more about what I do and read Tales from the Triverse and my upcoming projects over at simonkjones.substack.com. Thanks for listening.